During this time, they often were seen fighting for equal rights as men, and because of this, the time frame is often referred to as the second wave of feminism. They wanted these rights to be in education and the workforce and in society in general. There were three major people who really helped this time frame. First was Betty Friedan. She wrote one of the first books dedicated to feminism called The Feminine Mystique. Next was Gloria Steinem. She was one of the first people who wrote a magazine dedicated to feminism called Ms. Magazine, which is pretty much the basic of our girly magazines to this day. She also is often referred to as the mother of feminism. Finally, Coretta Scott King, name probably sounds familiar. She was married to Martin Luther King Jr. Fought for rights among women, not only in the Caucasian community, but also in the African American community. She was one of the founders of NOW alongside of Betty Friedan. Women in the 1960s and their lives were nothing like the women's lives today. They were often seen as housewives and told that their education was a backup plan, something that they really didn't need. And the women in the 60s saw this as a problem. They wanted women to know their education shouldn't be a backup plan, but as something that they could and should use. These women also saw differences in the workforce between men and women and really fought to change that. The 60s started these 2 decades of change and were mainly focused on the workforce. One of the first laws passed that helped feminism was the Equal Pay Act. This stated that if a man and a woman did the same job for the same hours with the same exact work, that they should be paid the same. This is important and is still in place today. Another law that was passed in the 60s was an executive order signed by President Johnson stating that sex discrimination in the workplace was strictly prohibited. This meant women now couldn't be held back from certain fields and could rise higher in fields like men. There were 2 major protests during this time in the 60s also. The first was the Miss America pageant protest. This took place, of course, during the Miss America pageant. And women during this time saw the dangers that were occurring during this pageant and were trying to spread the word that women shouldn't be judged like a piece of meat, but how they think and their feelings themselves. The 70s, well, much didn't change in anything but the workplace for women. The 70s were focused on the other 2 points I had mentioned earlier, education and social society. The Education Amendment was passed in the 1970s stating that any discrimination on any aspect of education was illegal. This meant a woman could go into any field of study they wanted to and couldn't be held back by a school. This is very important to me. I want to become a doctor, and if it wasn't for this law, would I be able to do that? Frankly, probably not. Another important law passed during the 1970s was the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. This stated that if a woman was pregnant during the time of her interview, the pregnancy could not be held against her. It didn't make her less of a candidate. This is important. The women could get new jobs and get their first jobs even if they were pregnant. And the money they earned could support the family they already had, themselves, and their baby. There was one major protest in the 1970s. This was on the 15th anniversary of women's suffrage and not only took place in Washington, D.C., but all over the country. This is major. This was one of the first ever moments where not only in one small area was a protest taking place, but all over the world and all over the country. And the country could not ignore it at this point. They saw the changes that were going on and realized women aren't going to stop fighting at this point. Now, maybe these laws are still in place today. And they are. But that doesn't stop the women's fight today. Maybe we're not fighting for equal rights as much now in the United States, but in many other countries, women are. And some women in the United States are still fighting for equal rights. And these women look back upon the women during the women's suffrage that gave us the right to vote, and the women of the 60s and 70s during the second wave of feminism as their predecessors that helped them and support them to this day. The women that fought for the right to vote found the land that women are now on today. The women in the 60s and 70s during the second wave of feminism built the foundation upon which women are on today. And women today are building the house that is feminism. If it wasn't for the women in the 60s and 70s who got all these laws passed that are still in place today, where would we be as women today? Would we still be the housewives that we were? Or would there have eventually been change? I can't say what would have happened. But if it wasn't for the women during the second wave of feminism, I know that life wouldn't be the same as it is today for any woman. Thank you.